Okay, so not only is this arguably peak Mercedes-Benz, but the W140 Series S-Class might be the last truly great Mercedes-Benz, because see, after these things were made, Mercedes-Benz shifted their focus from making vehicles of substance and quality to popularity and sales. But just because these were utterly brilliant back in the day, it doesn't mean they're really any good these days, because surely after 3 decades they must have just turned into a dodgy old bag of bolts. And even though they do look like a bargain on the used market, should you ever seriously consider buying one? Let's find out. Now, before we go on, guys, a massive thank you to WiperTech for supporting not only this video, but ReDriven in general. More on those guys later. Okay, so we're talking about the 3rd generation S-Class here that was available from 1992 to 1999, and it was available both as a long and short wheelbase sedan and a 2-door coupe. There was also a longer Pullman version, however, these are bloody rare, while the Sultan of Brunei custom ordered a handful of estate variants, and the Pope managed to get his hands on a one-off custom job too. But as far as the more, let's say, available models here in Australia, you could have them across 10 different variants with 4 different engines. But just to make things confusing, the model designation sometimes did and sometimes didn't relate to what was under the bonnet. For example, the S420 features a 4.2 litre V8, and you'd possibly assume that the 400 SE and the 400 SEL would be packing a 4 litre. Well, no, because these also have the 4.2. But luckily, Mercedes-Benz appreciated this mess of models, and with their first mid-cycle update in 1994, simplified the lineup to 6 different models, but this time with 5 different engines, all of which finally related to each other. Plus, improvements were made to the mechanical, the tech and the features, and some subtle visual enhancements were also thrown on. Another update occurred in 1995, featuring several mechanical improvements before this generation's final iteration being released in mid-1996, with changes focusing on cosmetic updates and more improvements to the tech and safety. Now, obviously, it can be an absolute nightmare trying to make sense of all this, but if you do need all the specific details, go to ReDriven.com and check out the awesome and completely free ReDriven cheat sheet. Now, fun fact, internationally, these things were available in over 25 different variants. And another fun fact, the 6-litre V12 engine in some of those is the same V12 as you'll find in the outstanding and incredible Pagani Zonda. Okay, now let's talk about looks. Elegant, classy, refined. This is exactly what this entire genre of car should be all about. It is a bloody large thing. I forgot how huge these are, but even to modern car standards, it is a big car. Now, you know when a car is designed really well, when they still look good on their base spec wheels? What I mean is that some cars just look a bit heavily underwheeled on the base spec wheels, and then when you put them on like large wheels, they suddenly come alive. This, for me, still looks fantastic on the standard wheels. In saying that, fit the 18-inch AMG like monoblock wheels, and my God, they look cool. Now, there are a few little exterior highlights that we do need to talk about. Firstly, remember, early 90s, or mid-90s, soft closed doors. Not the first car to do it in this kind of class, but still super impressive. Also, check this out. So it has like a retractable little handle for the boot. So that way, and it hides, when you close it, it hides back up under here. That way, if this is dirty, you don't get your hands dirty when you're opening and closing the boot. Genius, Mercedes. Also this. Okay, this car doesn't have these, but as this image will show, some of these have wipers for the headlights. That's nearly as cool as pop-up headlights. Now, before we go on, you might see a bit of a subtle hint of something cool going on here. That's right, it's the ReDriven S-Class t-shirt, available at ReDriven.com on the merch store. If you're an S-Class fan, you need one of these. Okay, now interior-wise, look, design-wise, it's clearly aging. It's definitely not from this century, but it's almost like a classy vintage watch. It's still beautiful and still works exactly as it should. Actually, the entire interior kind of gives you this, it very much feels like being on an episode of The Sopranos. In fact, this timber finish is actually called Zebrano. Coincidence? I think not. Actually, just expanding on the materials, I don't think there's any plastic in here, like short of obviously, you know, buttons and things like that, but like the carpet comes up really high here, there's no plastic there. Everything you touch is leather. This is actual timber. That's not like a plastic, that's actually like wood veneer. Yeah, materials like, how's this, like kind of slightly gathered leather there? It's just, it's gorgeous. Actually, speaking of buttons, I think I was expecting way more buttons than this. Obviously, being a 30-year-old car, there's no touch screens or anything like that. But the buttons all make sense. We'll get to those in a second. But yeah, the way they feel as well, like everything feels really quality. It's great. Now, ergonomics wise, in the driver's seat and the passenger seat, wonderful. These are basically lounge chairs on wheels. It's so comfortable. Plus, as far as adjustability goes, look at this. 30-year-old car, and you have reach and tilt adjustment, all powered. There's a million different, not a million, there's a whole bunch of different adjustments for the seat. Yeah, comfort-wise, you could sit here for hours. Now, wear and tear in this particular example, this has over 270,000 Ks on it. It's getting old, and it's really good. Like, you can tell it's getting old a bit, but honestly, like, the texture on the steering wheel is still there. The leather on the seats is getting a little bit firm, but it's still relatively supple. Door cards feel good. I can't believe how well this is lasting after all these years and this many kilometres. This gets used all the time as well, but yeah, it's fantastic. I should mention, obviously, with the car being this old, different models will vary enormously as far as wear and tear goes. But I got to say, this is wearing a whole lot better than a far more recent S-Class that we reviewed a little while ago, and the link is just up there. This is great. That one, not so much. Now, practicality up front, here we go with some of the cool buttons. You've got a glove box here with that button. Also, that opens up when you've got a little cup holder here, which is quite tall, good for, like, I don't know, a schooner or a midi of your finest ale. What is that bit? I think this is actually a pen holder. That's super cool. Oh, and is there a spot for coins? No, I'm not sure. So a good glove box there. Another button here, and you've got more storage up here. Again, felt lined, so it doesn't scratch any of your valuables. We assume this is a storage cubby hole, but it's not really wanting to open, and I don't really want to go, testing it. I don't want to break anything. So there could be storage behind there. Armrest is height adjustable, and underneath we have even more storage under here, which is really cool. Excellent sized door bins. There's nowhere specifically for your phone, but I think up there would be great, and it'll just polish the screen while it sits up there. And I think that is it for practicality up front. Now, in the back seat, I'm exactly 6 centimetres taller than iconic rapper and W140 S-Class aficionado 50 Cent. This is in my driving position, and it is absolutely divine back here. First of all, the seats are so comfortable. Space-wise, heaps of knee room, good amount of foot room. Because the windows are so large, it feels like airy and spacious. I don't feel like all claustrophobic in here. This is just such a delightful place to sit. Could sit back here for hours doing my business work on an autobahn. Materials back here, look, it's the same as the front. Everything is leather. There's hardly any plastics back here, and it just feels great. Wear and tear, now, really, honestly, really good. But what's good to see, so many of the cars that we feature, the back seats are hardly ever used, but the back seats in this feel like they've had the same use as the front seats, which feels appropriate for an S-Class. So look, you can tell that it is 30 years old, but even in saying that, like, all the leather still has texture to it. The leather on the seats is still soft and supple. There's a few little marks and nothing that a really quality detail wouldn't bring back to life, but it's good. Now, practicality in the back seat, you've got some beautiful gathered leather mat pockets. You've got your own air vents here. You've got a pull-down armrest. You've got your own vanity mirror that has little lights either side of it. You've got... Now, normally I'm like... Smoking disgusts me. This car has ashtrays either side in the doors. It kind of suits the car, doesn't it? Like, smoking's still gross. Actually, you know what? I just had a thought. Maybe that's what the storage in front of the gear selector is. Maybe that's an ashtray, but conveniently it's stuck closed because smoking is disgusting. But still, it does kind of suit this. I get why it has ashtrays in the back, but still, it doesn't want to open. Now it does open. There we go. That's it. Actually, no, it's not it, because there's also a first class, there's also a first aid kit. It's a first class first aid kit in the rear parcel shelf there. Actually, I might see if we can get that out. Let's have a look. Hey, look at this. First aid. Awesome. Now, in the boot, obviously being very popular with both the Mafia and the Yakuza, it's important that there's extra accommodation back here. And it's bloody comfortable. Heaps of space. Really nice. So the S-Class has been, and forever probably will be, where Mercedes-Benz showcase all of their latest features and technology. And even though this is pushing 30 years old, even what these come with as standard in the early base models is still pretty impressive. We're talking dual zone climate control, a premium sound system, power adjustable seats. Even some of the early models have like these extendable rear parking guide rods to help you navigate its immense size when reverse parking, plus all of this and more. But spec up to like a newer and higher spec model and things get spicy. Heated front and rear seats, burl walnut interior trim, a charcoal filter for the air conditioning system, double glazed windows, an integrated cellular telephone, and all of this and more. I should mention that that integrated phone probably won't work these days. Actually, there's a few things in here that might not work these days, but we'll get to that in a second. And obviously with the age of this car, there's no kind of, Bluetooth connectivity or Apple CarPlay or Android Auto or any of that sort of stuff. Obviously you can fit Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, all that sort of thing with aftermarket gear. But guys, I've got to ask a favor here. If you're going to do that, please keep it, kind of period correct. Don't go putting some cheap, dodgy system in it. Make it look classy. Keep the vibe of this thing up. Oh, also, we are talking about a premium European car here, so the list of optional extras is vast. Like the orthopedic seats that consisted of several air cushions in the seat that could be inflated to the driver's liking to find the perfect position. Now, as far as safety goes, aside from say certain altercations with tunnels in Paris, the S-Class, even to today's standards, is still kind of relatively safe. But to take you through exactly what safety features that you can expect, we're going to cut to another voiceover. But besides, say, sons of billionaires and former princesses, here's another demographic that love these things.
This thing ain't playing around when it comes to safety, all right? At the very minimum, you got a driver's side airbag and ABS. Then, later on, they step up their game because passengers get their own airbag, plus traction and stability control kick in. And from 96, side airbags make an entrance. It's like having your own crew watching your back, keeping you alive while you cruise like a boss. Capiche?
And guys, for all of the specific details, ReDriven.com, check out the cheat sheet. Now, you know what's really important when you're driving, and especially when it's raining? Being able to see where you're going, and that's where WiperTech comes in. WiperTech wipers are quick and easy to order, quick and easy to install, they fit perfectly, and you can save money buying them by clicking the link down there in the description. Go check out WiperTech, they're awesome. Okay, so what's it like to drive a W140 S-Class? A more accurate question should be, what's it like to pilot a W140 Series S-Class? Because this thing is a land yacht. So like the initial impression is just its sheer size, not necessarily in a negative way, until you're driving down like a tight suburban street like this and some idiot with absolutely no spatial awareness is coming the opposite way. All of a sudden you go, God, this is a big vehicle. And then there's like a feeling of class that just envelops you. Like it's so quiet in here and it just wafts along like you're driving on a cloud. Like if you hit a bump, you're not really aware of the bump. It just kind of does this like slight kind of relaxed motion over the bump, just kind of massaging the bump into kind of submission. Look, obviously this is no performance or sports car by any means, and with how absorbent the suspension is, there is a bit of pitch and roll through the corners, especially if you start to get up it. You're an idiot if you start to drive one of these things fast. That's not what the car's about. But even then, it still gives you this kind of sense of confidence, probably because it weighs more than the Titanic. The steering is incredibly light, and that does help kind of hide the 2 tons of weight you're dealing with. But when you put your foot down, like, again, it wafts forward with enthusiasm. Now, as far as wafting along in silence, there are no rattles in here. Like, this is 30 years old, 276, nearly 277,000 kilometers. Interior, as far as noises go, there is only one noise, and it's this weird buzzing from a little fan up here. That's the only noise in here. There's no other creaks, no other rattles. That's probably easy fixed. It might cost thousands of dollars to fix it, but besides that, it's beautiful in here. Look, overall, for me, this is exactly what an S-Class should feel like to drive. Like, it just feels premium and classy. And because of the age of this one, it also injects this kind of feeling of retro cool as well. Like, I think, for me, this feels more special than driving a newer model S-Class because it's just a bit more individual, it's a bit more unique. Those newer luxury cars as well, they can make you feel a bit arrogant, like you just feel like you're better than everyone else because they're so bloody expensive. With this, because it's affordable, I just feel like I'm cocooned in like my own little kind of luxury resort on a yacht, but still, I want to invite my friends to come and enjoy it as well. I tell you what, a whole bunch of newer luxury cars could really learn a thing or two off this, because this feels special even after 30 years. What a thing. Now, as far as what they cost to buy, most examples here in Australia, they hover around the $15,000 to $30,000 mark. But there's two ways of looking at this. A, $15,000 to $30,000 does seem like a lot of money to ask for a 30-year-old car that requires constant care and attention, and the parts and associated labour will quickly add up in price. But B, $15,000 to $30,000 does seem like a steal for what is an absolute future classic, and arguably makes more sense than buying a far newer S-Class, because to many, this thing represents the last truly great Mercedes-Benz. But buying it is one thing, because you then need to be able to afford to actually drive it and maintain and own it. Because remember, these things were made at a time when petrol prices were as low as like 46 cents a litre here in Australia. These were not really made with, I suppose, fuel efficiency in mind. So, and obviously it's going to vary depending on the model and the engine and all that sort of stuff, but these things can be very thirsty. Also, certain parts can be an absolute challenge to find and therefore end up asking a premium. But the big tip here is join an owners group. The depth of knowledge that these owners groups provide cannot be understated, and the help they can provide is incredible. We actually joined a whole bunch of W140 and S-Class owners groups to research this video, and I can't say thank you enough. You guys have been incredible. Although, as S-Class fans, they might not enjoy this next bit. Sorry. Now look, it's no secret that the W140 is an absolute masterclass in engineering, and that the attention to detail and the tiny tolerances during manufacturing would give the current Mercedes-Benz accountants an absolute emotional breakdown. But after 3 decades, what goes wrong? Here we go. Some of the power windows, they can fail over time because some of them are double glazed, and that extra weight puts more load on the actual motors. Also, just on the subject of the windows, because they are double glazed, if you get any moisture or air in between the panes of glass, it can get sort of like milky or like a foggy effect. But to fix it requires replacing all of the glass, and that's going to be expensive. Okay, next up, on models that have been neglected, the paint on the bonnet and the roof and the boot can get kind of faded and a bit crap. In saying that, it's a 30-year-old car. That's going to happen to most 30-year-old cars. Okay, next up, the pneumatic pump and actually the pneumatic system that controls things like the soft closing doors, the boot release, the little antennas that pop up for your parking, all that sort of stuff. It can have issues and completely fail, which means anything controlled by the pneumatic system will have issues and possibly fail. Also, in terms of those soft close features, the actual mechanical equipment that makes that happen, it can fail too. Okay, next up, because the wiring loom is technically biodegradable, anything controlled by electricity can glitch out and fail. We're talking about door locks and lights and all sorts of stuff. Okay, the front and rear glass, it can delaminate and you get this kind of slightly weird milky white effect. It can even sort of turn like a brown kind of colour. Again, the only way to fix it is to replace it. The sunroofs are known to have a whole bunch of issues like leaks and the switches not working to even just not opening, or worst case scenario, not closing. But also we can't leave the headlights alone because they too can go milky, which therefore might affect their performance. Now, some good news, the W140 seems to be very resistant to rust. There are some sporadic reports of rust around the front quarter panel, near the indicator, around the wheel arches and near the boot lock mechanism, but generally speaking it only happens with S-Classes that have been poorly repaired. Now inside, okay, here we go. First up, the HVAC or the air conditioning system's evaporator, it's known to fail, but the problem is it requires the entire dashboard to come out to repair it. That's going to be expensive. Next up, the little electric motors that control all of the different seat adjustments, they can fail over time. So if you are looking at buying one of these, make sure that all the seat mechanisms work in the right direction, and if they don't, it could get expensive. Okay, next up, check out all of the wood grain trim. If it's like cracked or peeling, it either means that the car's been sitting in the sun for too long, or someone's had to go at pulling the dashboard apart and hasn't put it back together properly. And again, getting replacement parts, not so much expensive, but can be hard to track down. Then you have the plastic trim in the interior, which likely there isn't much of, but the plastic trim that is there, over this age, they can become quite brittle and they can crack and break and get pretty rattly when you hit some rough roads. Now, remember how I mentioned that the wiring harnesses can like biodegrade and fail over time? Well, unfortunately in the interior, that means that really anything powered by electricity it can get a bit glitchy and freak out. In fact, even the gauges can give you faulty readings. That's a concern. Now, before we get into mechanically what can go wrong with the S-Class, a massive thank you to Hayden for lending us his sublime S-Class. All of those problems that we've just mentioned, none of them have happened with this particular car. And also, if you have a car that you'd like to see featured on ReDriven and you live in Sydney or Newcastle, message us below there. Also, if you've made it this far in the video, hopefully you're enjoying it. And if so, why not hit that like and subscribe button? And if you really want to support ReDriven, why not become a Patreon member? That'd be awesome. Okay, so mechanically, what can go wrong with the W140 S-Class? I'd love to tell you, but I can't because I'm not a qualified mechanic. But Jim is.
People used to say that these things were reliable because they were over-engineered. Well, personally, I think they were probably engineered okay, not over-engineered, but nowhere near as good as, say, a Lexus. But it's the later model ones that were engineered terribly unnecessarily overcomplicated, which made them very much unreliable, which made the old ones look more reliable than they actually were, if that makes sense. In Australia, we only got the 6 and 8 cylinder petrol versions. I mean, there are the V12 versions, but that's just literally twice as many problems as the 6 cylinder. I don't know why anyone would sign up for that. So we're just going to stick to the 6 and 8 cylinder petrols today. The V8 petrol, well, mechanically speaking, they're actually pretty reliable. They do leak oil. They do have a few complications with the timing chain, although it's not actually the chain, that's actually a really big, thick double row timing chain. It's actually the tensioners and guides that fail. They do fail, they break off and fall apart and cause a whole bunch of timing chain and catastrophic failure issues. They also have another problem with there's an oil supply line that there's 16 little bypass tubes inside the head. They often leak as well internally, which causes oil supply problems to the lifters, a whole bunch of noises and very expensive to fix. They have an old school sort of complicated ignition system and fuel injection system, which is pretty problematic only because it's old now, so be prepared to work on that occasionally too. The M104 6-cylinder petrol in these, and fun fact, that's the same as the engine in the SsangYong, Rexton and Musso. Overall, actually pretty reliable, with no one big common problem that makes them fail catastrophically. They do all leak oil. Other than that, they're just known for the same typical problems you'd have with any engine of its age, you know, water pumps and coil packs and things like that failing. Overall, actually pretty reliable. The transmissions in these, the 4 and the 5 speeds, they do have a whole bunch of issues. They do have valve body and solenoid complications. The 5 speeds have issues with their electronics within the gearbox, and they also have a problem with the plug connector that runs all those electronics. Another issue they have, which is pretty common, is the internal selector in the car. It can often be temperamental, and usually it's because someone spilt their coffee in it. So yeah, that's a pretty common problem. Look, yeah, these things are pretty old now, and you are going to have a lot of little problems with it. For example, the biodegradable insulation on the wiring harness and all the electronics for that matter are actually going to give you a massive headache. Look, the takeaway here is the ones remaining on the road, the survivors, they're actually probably okay cars. If you're an enthusiast that likes doing a lot of, small repairs and big repairs, or if you're an enthusiast that likes paying someone to do those big and small repairs, it can be immensely rewarding. So yeah, the takeaway is, pretty good car.
Okay, so should you buy one? Oh, it's super tempting, isn't it? But as many of us know, temptation can come at a cost. See, best case scenario, you have a substantial budget and spend a premium buying a mint condition and fastidiously maintained example. Look, yes, it will be incredible in so many ways. However, it is still a 30-year-old luxury car. It will require time and money to keep it at its best. But, and look, obviously this is pure speculation, you could be buying a classic at its very lowest price. But what about worst case scenario? Well, look, that means that you're on a very tight budget and therefore you're going to be looking at the lower end of the market. This equates to potentially buying just someone else's problems. And getting a W140 back to its best is not for the faint-hearted. But putting the time and the money, and again, you could be buying a classic. Look, you know what? Yes, you should buy a good example of the W140 S-Class. In fact, we'd go as far as saying you should buy one of these over really any of the more recent examples. Look, generally speaking, these are going to be possibly more reliable, they're arguably more special, and come on guys, objectively, this is way cooler. Just be very, very aware of what you're getting yourself into, because remember, there's nothing more expensive in the world than a cheap Mercedes-Benz. Which then brings us to the question, and you might need to watch this video up here to formulate an educated opinion. Do you buy one of these, or do you buy a Toyota Century for around about the same price? Let us know in the comments. See you next time. I should mention that integrated cellular. Okay. Aside from sons of billionaires and former princesses, we're going to take you. It just exudes premium luxury. Oh, me, man. Come on, brain. These can also go milky.
The later models that were engineered unnecessarily complicated that made them unreliable, that made the early ones look reliable.